Good afternoon, Richmonders. Welcome to the Nexus with Charles Wilson. And of course, I'm your host, Charles Wilson, managing partner of CW Consulting Group and sponsor representative for the Legacy Builders Apprenticeship Academies. I want to start off today by first giving you a definition. And it'll set the tone for what today's topic and discussion will be with who I am going to introduce as my special guest here shortly. I want to read the definition first. The conducting, supervising, or managing of something, especially the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. That definition is for the word stewardship. Stewardship. And the importance of stewardship in the development and sustaining of relationships. So today's topic is called Collaboration versus Competition, the development of the mastermind. Now, I'm an avid reader of an author by the name of Napoleon Hill, and most know him from a book he wrote called Think and Grow Rich. Another book that sort of falls under the radar when we think of him is one that he wrote probably maybe 10 years after Think and Grow Rich, but yet it falls under one of his most greatest offerings called The Laws of Success. There are 15 laws that are discussed in that book. And he starts the book off with a concept regarding a mastermind, which he describes as being formed when there are two or more people thinking and acting in harmony towards a common goal. That through that harmony and agreement and thought, the formation of a third mind evolves, by which ideas and strategies are introduced by the creative power of that third mind, which is the mastermind. In the book of Matthew of the Bible, a similar concept is shared in which Jesus says that when two or three are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst. So my being here with you today is in no small attribution to having been in harmony with the person who was the nexus between me and my guest today. Miss Yvette Roots with the Mayor's Office of Community Wealth Builders sat in harmony with me last summer and observed through the eyes of faith that I would be a good steward of her already established, relationships with key people in the city. She made an email introduction to this man. And within less than an hour, he responded and he shot me a text to my cell phone asking when I wanted to connect. And I asked if he'd be open to come in by my office at 5264 Chamberlain Road, which is inside the Brook Hill Azalea Shopping Center, on that next day. And he came to meet me there and toured our new training facility and our lab. And since that time, Mr. Michael Hopkins has been the nexus between our apprenticeship academy and not only other employers for the graduates, but to the carpentry instructor we currently have, Mr. Otis Hendricks, who's delivering commercial and residential carpentry training to this cohort of Richmond residents. He's been a steady hand. He's been a confidant, and a supportive advisor as we navigated the landscape of the region. He is Mr. Michael Hopkins, president of Emerge Construction, one of the few thriving, wholly owned Black commercial general contracting firms in Richmond and throughout the Commonwealth. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And please share with the audience a bit about your company. And I'm going to follow up with asking you this: what the impact of collaboration and your own good stewardship of relationships has contributed to your sustained success in the construction industry?
So we've been around about 30 years. We started right here on 400 West Gray Street. We've always, our philosophy has been teamwork. Together, everyone achieves more. Mm-hmm. So in all of our documentation things we send out, it's about team. Because we are a small company and the only way we thrive is through relationships. 85 to 90% of our business is referral or repeat customers. It's all because of relationships and collaboration with people that we work with, that we build relationships over a long period of time. We have had suppliers that we've worked with, city administration, subcontractors. As you know, we have our own in-house working program to bring people up. And that's just the way we were fundamentally able to grow our business. There was no major partner. It was just through relationships and through collaboration and learning how to build relationships. And that's the essence of who we are. We are probably a $5 to $10 million company, depending on what year and how projects fall. We have 11 member staff. We also do some design build, and we also do a lot of development. A lot of our stuff we internally develop and build. We hardly solicit work because it's just not our template. We don't find that we can build relationships that way. We've never bidded a city or municipality job. We just didn't find that to be a way to build relationships. It's a very competitive, which you said you get into. But we found that for us to sustain our 30 years, it was all about building a relationship and that team philosophy.
That's a long run. 30 years is a long run, and to be able to provide for not only your family, but to have people who trust that your leadership, your judgment, your stewardship of relationships is going to allow them to be able to provide for their families, because that's not an easy thing to hold when you're at the top, to have the responsibility of other people and how they sustain themselves. They're banking their ability to pay their bills off of knowing that what they're supposed to have in their account, that every week or 2 weeks that you may have your rotation as, is going to be there.
That's right.
How does that feel for you when you think about where you've come from and being to this place?
Well, I've always thrived on the entrepreneurship, right? And I've always thrived on that if two people come together with like minds, like we talked about, we can achieve mostly anything. I think that we at Emerge, we bite off what we can eat. I think we don't overstretch ourselves. We don't joint venture with people. So we stay in a niche and we grow. And then we offer individuals within our company the opportunity to learn, right? And so, as we talked about before, we have, guys that come in that may be a laborer. I'm just finishing up a major project. The guy came in really as a laborer, but he came from the banking industry, dropped into the construction industry. He's now superintendent on a multi-million-dollar job because the infrastructure was there, the team philosophy was there, the collaboration was there. And when you have that, it works.
So now that, when I came to the region, again, I wanted to really highlight how important it was to me to have someone who's regarded, who's revered, who's respected throughout Richmond, to effectively have you come in with no knowledge outside of what we were able to converse about in that first conversation. And your willingness at that point to even say, hey, I've got my own thing going on. But I think what would be even better is if we brought what you do to the table and what I do to the table and achieve an even greater goal. So I want you to just talk to me about what was it that did it for you that made you feel as though this relationship could work and that you'd be open to sharing your sort of book of relationships with someone like me who's pretty much new on the scene.
Well, see, you're first a reference from Yvette roots, right? So I've been knowing Yvette for probably 25 years of my career in Richmond, and I've worked with community wealth building in the city of Richmond. While I never bidded on projects, I've always worked with them on trying to get that framework together that would create the opportunity for me to go in and get guys to work. And when she explained your program, what you were doing, I immediately had to meet you because it was a missing piece. And I have talked to, like I said, in 2 decades or 3 decades, I've talked to a lot of individuals that are doing the program. The need to me is so great that everybody needs to work together. You have a certain population in the group that you can reach. I'm looking at a certain population. There's different techniques and skill levels that you bring that I didn't see once I talked to you that you were offering. So, it was just you having a niche that I thought would fit because the need is so great. And I think that once everybody understands that their niche in each compartment of this issue will manifest results, then I think you're talking about, it'll be people working together versus competing against each other.
Yeah, it's funny you talked about, just lanes. That sometimes is its own impediment. And that's actually, segue into one of the other things I wanted to talk about. And it's that idea of competition. So when I think about that, and I said competition, I'm putting it in the context of, when you have a common goal that develops and pushes forward an idea for other people.
Sure.
And when you're talking about the good of the people for other people, it is so necessary to have that village. And when doing that, you're advancing those actionable solutions to help eradicate poverty. This is what I'm speaking to. This is sort of the tenets of why I do what I do. Eradicating poverty in the Black community.
Sure.
And when you have that competition, in my estimation at least, it distracts from and dilutes the importance of the contributions of key participants in the plan's formation.
Sure.
And instead of proper role recognition and team assembly, in which each participant is enabled to deliver their talents and their strengths in a capacity that enhances, that scales, and replicates effective solutions. Instead, what you get is it being replaced with pride and ego.
Sure.
And that dominates and permeates, establishing, I would say, the judgment and peels away from the pool of shared resources and knowledge. That we have this lack of trust, that someone is going to steal your idea, that your contribution won't be given credit when this thing finally pops, and that we will try and replace you without adequate compensation, or you feel that your desires, won't be heard. And there's this all of a sudden need to hoard information and resources. Thereby, it's limiting the multiplication factor that I believe collaboration creates. So I'm going to ask you, have you experienced the impact of competition spoiling what could have been an effective deployment of a plan that essentially lifted all boats? Where, what were some of the casualties you observed from that impact of competition instead of collaboration being on the same?
So let me fall back one quick second.
Yeah.
So one thing that really got my energy up when I first got into this kind of team philosophy was, back in maybe the 80s or 70s, the auto industry was struggling to keep up with the Asian market and how they were making cars and GM versus, Nissan. And I just remember reading about how the Coalition of American Businessmen and Politicians went and created a winning coalition and team relationship with the Asian or European automakers to better the American automakers, right? So that philosophy has always stuck with me, how we can, as a country, work with international or multicultural countries and share resources, technology, things needed to make everything better as a whole. So I bring that philosophy to what you're talking about, is that we, in any industry that we're in, as African Americans, need to understand that we are oftentimes working from a third world perspective, and our resources and our education and our finances, access to capital. That creates some of the things that you're talking about, the worriness of I'm not going to get recognized, or I'm not going to be the one that's noted for the achievement. But if you look at the collaboration and the winning coalition, if you come within, you will be recognized and your talents will be received, whether it's here or above. I've never had an opportunity where it did not happen, because when you're doing it for just reasons, your results will be seen. And so when you think of how we, as a race of people or a nationality within a country that is struggling to get there, where our forefathers at one time were doing it in the 1800s, right? Now, where are we today? Today, we're at major projects. I'll give you a good example when you talk about how competition may have spoiled a great opportunity. Okay. The Navy Hill project, which I was on as the MBE coordinator, was, I think, one of the best thought out initiatives of how to get MBEs involved on a major level, right? The detail and the nuances of how to make and bridge those gaps and the resources that were available had never been done before. And that's because the idea was received by big business, was received by the politicians. Well, then it trickled down that the message was it has to be or it won't. And so then those resources floated to the table. People did not have as much of the things that you talk about to worry about competitors because the pie was so big.
It was so big.
Right. And so that's where I fall back to the auto industry. The idea and the project has to be so big and the right people have to be brought to the table. And the Richmond business community and the political infrastructure here have every resource it takes to create these things, these initiatives, these upcoming initiatives.
That's right.
And those things can flow down. I think what you're doing, what other people are doing, the Votex Center, I think there just needs to be the ideology. I'll give you an example. So when the Navy Hill project was going on, there was $10 million set aside for affordable housing. If you took $5 million of that and put it towards job training, what an impact. You had international companies and national companies that did not specialize in that training wanting to get into that training. Well, the pipeline needed to be primed because with or without those projects, we still have a major shortage, not only in the construction industry, the trucking industry. I mean, there are so many industries.
Yes.
Now, what does that mean? That means that the like-minded people need to get in the room and see that the benefit of it, right? So, if you're making $15 an hour, you're going to buy a bigger TV.
That's right.
Right. You're going to buy more things.
There's a trickle down.
Right.
There's a latent effect from these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so from my personal perspective, I saw a wealth of knowledge being shared. I saw great collaboration because the idea was big. I think that when you get down to the smaller initiatives, I think they are harder to ingrain or incorporate people because there's not a lot of dollar value, right?
Yeah.
But there is still the need for the funds to be there to train the people for the end result, even though there's not this big initiative, because there's still $3 billion worth of construction going on. There are contractors with $400 million and still a $300 million backlog because they can't get to it. So, I think with the need that's happening with the employees that are needed, I think the competition is stepping back. I think we're going more and more collaborative. What's taken off with you in such a short order is because that need is so big, right?
Right.
And so if we continue to work towards that, what I worry is that there's a recession or there's something that then starts to lock the pipeline.
Contracted.
Exactly. And so, I've been in meetings with non-African American subcontractors, and they tell me, hey, we need workers. We have a heroin epidemic out in the suburbs. So if you have somebody that wants to work, we're willing to train you because the need. Now we have to bring the resources to someone like you immediately. Right. And so, I will say probably 15, 20 years ago, these weren't discussions we were having. There's when you, like I said, when you had you're not getting involved, you're not getting invited to this table because the construction industry and things were not as big. The need wasn't there that everybody needs somebody to work. And whether you are African American, Hispanic, European, we need people to work. Right. So, I think now more than ever, there's a lack of that competitiveness that's preventing the opportunity to manifest itself. I think it's more doing with the resources being put there before there's this big initiative, right? I think we can get to that and get that through to the business community that has the philanthropic dollars.
Right.
We can get to the city administration and policies. And I would say this, that the bigger part about the issue in this industry or the procurement industry is systemic policies that are in place. You can't say you have an MBE program or a program to help small businesses and you have these rules of engagement that don't allow someone to manifest because these city projects don't come along enough for someone to build that curve. But you have a way to build a pipeline for workers that can fuel that $3 billion, the federal buildings and all these projects that are going on. So, I know you really wanted to talk about the competitiveness.
This is organic.
Yeah. And so for me, like I said before, I built my template and widget off relationships.
Yes.
And so we've had some competitiveness or not been invited to the table. But I say that's because of my problem of lack of building that proper relationship and that bridge. So,
And I think you brought up something else that was good that I talk to a lot, and it's those 3 Ps: that philanthropic, that public, that private relationship, and how important that is in ensuring that we show sort of that model of how everybody ultimately can win.
Absolutely.
When you can identify where everyone wins, so the city wins because its residents now are taxpayers. They are purchasing homes. They are adding to the property taxes and sales taxes. You have the private sector who are ultimately able to clear out that backlog of projects. You don't have that sort of pause and that break in the action because there are not enough bodies.
Sure.
They aren't then going and doing bidding wars for the town.
Right.
Well, I'm going to pay you an extra $1 an hour. I'm paying you an extra $1.50 an hour because of this shrunken or limited pool of people. And then the philanthropic community, sometimes I believe they're just like, give me something that gives me some real results.
Sure.
I don't want this stalwart sort of cookie cutter. We're having these nice galas and things, and when we give you a contribution, 90% of it is operations.
Right. Yes.
Right? Put butts in seats. Give me people who really can say, here's how we accomplish and utilize, and we're good stewards.
There you go.
Of those dollars, of those contributions, of that belief, and or even in that in kind, or I would say that just resources of knowledge.
Sure.
You showed me a way to be more efficient, to scale, or to replicate, and those things end up being huge when you see something that, if it just had a little infusion,
yes,
what it could do for the masses, what it could do for the people, it would be something that would have no match. And I like something else you said, where I've talked about in this show. There are a few words they'll hear. One of them is love. I really honestly believe that us cementing, or at least going back to the base of love, being a driver behind what we do, that's going to create a respect and almost a anticipation. It's the faith component.
Right.
That there is a repository, this is my belief at least, there's a repository of goodwill that exists.
Sure.
That every time you move yourself out of the way and you look for how I can allow this thing that I have to contribute to the people, something outside of myself, that you make a deposit. And in those times when you do not know or expect, when you truly need it, there's a withdrawal made on your behalf, which allows you to sustain and move into the next phase of whatever it is. I feel like when you are moving in your purpose, that each step will provide all the provisions that you have in order for you to be successful in the attaining of whatever that is that you're purposed to do. So I'm appreciative of just you sharing how important that's been in your success, because it takes people a lot of time, a long time, spinning their wheels with not recognizing. And I'll go into this, especially when you start talking about the collaborative piece. I have a feeling that you come to the table thinking about, how can I add value? That's right. If the first thing you think about is what I get out of it, then you typically then create that environment that I'm talking about, where there's that competitiveness. I don't think everyone's coming into the table saying, how do I add to this shared pool of knowledge and of resources? When you start thinking of how I add value, not only do you allow for the sharing of that information, but you allow for people to remove their fear. Sure. And the creative process can begin. And that's what I'm saying to you, that I've appreciated you being okay with allowing me to say what I've said to you transparently. And then you say, Charles, let me open up the books. I know an organization, I know a company that would hire the people that are graduating with their group. Sure. Let me connect you with them. And I say all this last thing. Never miss an opportunity to build trust. Sure. From being where you say you're going to be when you say you're going to be there, from calling back when you say you're going to call back or email. Those small things allow people to say, when have I ever not X? Right. And then they can look back at your body of work and say, I can't think of a time. And therefore, I think I can trust you with this. Sure. And then we go from there. Sure.
Well, I'll leave you with this. So the new buzzword is value add. You hear it everywhere. My bandwidth and value add. And like you said, if you can be a value add in something, you will get that opportunity, right? But when you get that opportunity, the people that give you that opportunity also need to know that you need to have the same resource, access, grace, and mercy that their colleagues do. That's how you build a relationship. And that is the most important thing, I think, to take away when you're talking about collaborating versus competition. Because I can tell you some of the major contractors in this town have better relationships than they've had probably successes as they were building their company. And then they became a value add. And when you're introducing somebody into your widget, just know they may be a value add that needs the resources and the grace and mercy that you provide as you build your other relationships. And that will create that win-win. A rising tide lifts all boats, right? Because when the rising tide comes, there's some boats that are small that are getting rocked, right? It gets wavy, but because of relationships and the spirit of collaboration versus competition, and knowing where that person started from, like your program, the program I have, we know where people start. We know where they can go, and trust and believe in this time and age with technology and resources. If you give somebody grace and mercy and those opportunities and the resources, you will see not only like your situation manifest, but you will see the spirit that you've given someone to manifest themselves.
Wow. So with that, I want to thank you, Mike, for being here, for sharing very candidly your thoughts about this whole concept and idea. At the end of the day, for me, and what I think has been with you for all these decades, is to bring solutions to the table. I'm almost ready to call this, action, action program. All I care about is people that are ready to do.
Absolutely.
We've done so much talking, and talking has its place if it's strategic.
Right.
If there are things that are going to come from it that allow people to take action. But I want to thank you for just entrusting again the time, the relationship. That's one thing we learn in time, in growing, the importance of time. So I feel like when you have something truly to talk about that adds value, you'll find people willing to give that one commodity we have that we can't get back.
Yes, sir.
Which is that time. So until next week, Richmonders, I want to thank you for listening. We're going to do. I want us to just do in whatever capacity we can and give of our gifts. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.